I was born on a rainy night in a small town where the hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet despair, while other babies were welcomed into the world with their mother's warm embrace. I came into it with silence. My mother never opened her eyes again after giving birth to me. People tell me she was beautiful, gentle, with soft brown hair and a smile that could melt storms. But I never knew her, except through fading photographs, and my father's trembling voice when he spoke of her. My father, Daniel, was everything to me in those first few years. He was young, only 26, and suddenly alone with an infant he didn't know how to raise. But he tried. He worked long hours at a factory, his hands rough with grease and metal, and yet every night he came home, held me close, and whispered that I was worth every sacrifice. He used to call me his little miracle. I remember nights when we barely had food on the table, yet he would push his plate toward me and say, "Eat, sweetheart." "I'm not hungry." I knew he was, but I was too little to argue, so I just chewed slowly and tried to smile, pretending everything was okay. For the first few years, we lived in a small rented apartment above a bakery. The smell of fresh bread was always in the air, and sometimes the kind old baker would give me warm rolls for free. Life was hard, yes, but it was simple and it was ours. My father was my entire world, and I was his reason to keep going. But life has a cruel way of reminding you that happiness is fragile. When I was 6 years old, my father remarried. I didn't understand what it meant at the time, only that suddenly there was a new woman in our home. A woman with painted nails, sharp perfume, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Her name was Linda. At first, she pretended to care. She bought me a pink dress and combed my hair, but the way her fingers tugged at the knots made my scalp sting. She would call me sweetheart, but the word rolled off her tongue like something bitter. I noticed the change in my father, too. He laughed less. He worked more overtime. And slowly I began to feel like an intruder in my own home. Linda didn't want me around. I saw it in her eyes. The irritation when I asked my father for help with homework. The tight smile when I sat beside him on the couch. She wanted him all to herself. And I was nothing more than a shadow of his first wife, the woman she could never replace. I was only a child, but even then I could feel the storm coming. At first I tried to believe Linda's smile. I wanted so badly to think she might love me, or at least tolerate me. But children can sense the truth long before adults admit it. And the truth was, Linda didn't see me as a child. She saw me as an obstacle. The changes started small. My father would leave for work, and as soon as the door closed behind him, her tone shifted. The gentle sweetheart turned into a cold girl. She would hand me a list of chores, longer than my little arms could hold. Dishes, laundry, sweeping. If I missed a spot, she'd frown and say, "Your mother should have taught you better." Oh wait, she couldn't, could she? Those words stung like fire. I didn't have a comeback. I didn't even know how to process that kind of cruelty. When my father returned home, Linda transformed into someone else. She cooked his favorite meals, wore her best dresses, and laughed at his tired jokes. If I dared to complain, she'd shake her head, wrap an arm around me, and tell him, "She's just acting out. You know how kids are." My father would sigh, rub his forehead, and tell me to be respectful. I wanted to scream that he didn't see what I saw, but I couldn't. One evening, I overheard them talking in hushed voices. Linda was whispering about money, about the savings account. My father had kept for me the inheritance from my late mother's family. I didn't understand much then, only that it was supposed to be mine when I grew up. But Linda's voice was sharp, almost hungry. "She doesn't need it," she said. "We could use it now. Start fresh, maybe buy a bigger house. Don't you want a better life for us?" My father was silent for a long time. I pressed my ear against the bedroom door, heart pounding so loud I thought they'd hear me. Finally, he spoke. "That money is for her. It's the only thing her mother left behind." I wanted to hug him for protecting me, but Linda's reply sent chills down my spine. "Then she'll grow up spoiled, thinking she deserves more than she does. Trust me, Daniel, I'll teach her humility. Teach me humility." The words echoed in my head, and from that night on, her lessons became harsher. I was sent to bed without dinner if I didn't finish every chore. If I cried, she told me tears were for the weak. If I smiled, she accused me of being ungrateful. Slowly, I learned to shrink, to make myself invisible when she was around. But children can't stay invisible forever, and deep down I knew Linda was waiting for the moment when she could take more than just my childhood innocence. She wanted control over my life, over my inheritance, over everything my mother had left for me. And one day she got her chance. By the time I turned 10, I had learned the art of silence. I did my chores without complaint, kept my head down at school, and rarely asked my father for anything. But no amount of silence could shield me from Linda's growing grip on our lives. It started with little things. She began handling the mail, the bills, the bank statements. My father, exhausted from long shifts at the factory, seemed relieved to let her take care of things. At night, I'd see her sorting through papers, her red nails tapping on the table as she calculated numbers that weren't hers. One Saturday, I overheard a phone call that changed everything. Linda was in the kitchen, her voice low but sharp. "Yes, the paperwork is ready. My husband has agreed to it. The account will be transferred under joint management." "No, she won't know. She's a child." She was talking about me, about the money my mother's family had left for my future. That night, I tried to talk to my father. I found him sitting on the edge of his bed, head bowed in his hands, the weight of the world pressing down on him. "Daddy," I whispered, "is Linda taking my money?" He looked at me, startled, then tired. "Where did you hear that?" "I heard her on the phone." My voice shook. "That money is supposed to be mine, right? For college? For when I grow up?" His shoulders slumped. For a long time he said nothing. Then he reached out, touched my cheek, and sighed. "Sweetheart, Linda just wants what's best for this family. We need that money now. You'll understand when you're older." Understand? I wanted to scream. How could I understand that the only piece of my mother left to me was being taken away? But I didn't scream. I just nodded because I could see the pain in his eyes. He wasn't doing it out of malice. He was doing it out of weakness. The next morning, the bank papers disappeared from the drawer where my father once kept them. And just like that, my inheritance was gone. From then on, Linda's power over me grew even stronger. She knew I had nothing left that was mine. No security, no promise of a future, not even the comfort of believing my father could protect me. She had taken it all. I remember sitting by the window that night, staring out at the streetlights flickering in the dark. I pressed my forehead to the glass and whispered to the mother I had never known. "They've taken everything you left me. What am I supposed to do now?" There was no answer, only the cold reflection of a girl who suddenly felt like she belonged to no one. As the years passed, I learned how to live under Linda's shadow. By the time I was 13, I had grown taller, my hair longer, my voice steadier, but inside I still felt small. She made sure of it. Her words were sharper than knives. "You'll never be anything," she'd sneer if I brought home a good grade. "Books don't wash dishes, girl. Don't think you're smarter than me." If I looked in the mirror too long, she'd remind me, "Don't flatter yourself. You'll never be half the woman your mother was." Sometimes late at night, I'd hear my father arguing with her. His voice would rise, hers would cut through like glass. "She's just a child, Linda," he'd shout. "Why do you treat her this way?" But the next morning, he'd be silent, worn down, like a man who had lost the strength to fight. And I would sit at the breakfast table staring at my bowl of cereal, knowing he loved me, but also knowing he wasn't strong enough to save me. School became my only escape. I loved the quiet rows of books in the library, the chalk squeaking on the blackboard, even the smell of pencils and paper. In those hallways, I felt like maybe I could be someone else, someone not trapped, someone who had choices. But Linda made sure to remind me I didn't. She kept me busy with chores, demanded I come straight home, and rarely allowed me to see friends. When other girls were going to birthday parties or sleepovers, I was scrubbing floors, folding laundry, or making dinner while she painted her nails and watched TV. Still, in the secret corners of my heart, I began to dream. I dreamed of leaving, of getting a scholarship, of working hard enough to build a life that was mine and mine alone. A life where Linda's voice could no longer reach me. But every time I thought about the money she had taken, my inheritance, my mother's last gift to me, I felt a bitter ache in my chest. That money could have helped me escape. It could have bought me time, books, maybe even college. But it was gone, and I had to accept that. One evening, I was cleaning the attic when I found an old box of my mother's belongings. Inside were faded letters, a few photographs, and a locket with her picture. I held it tightly, tears blurring my vision. For the first time, I spoke aloud to her. "I'm trying. Mom, I don't know how, but I'll find a way out. I promise." The attic was dusty and quiet, but in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, hope. It was small, fragile, like a candle in the wind, but it was enough to keep me going. By the time I was 16, my world had split in two. There was the world Linda forced me to live in. Chores. Insults. The constant reminder that I was unwanted. And then there was the world inside my head. The one I built in daydreams, full of escape and freedom. At school, teachers praised my essays and encouraged me to think about college. "You have a gift," my English teacher told me once. "Don't waste it." Those words lit something inside me, something Linda hadn't managed to crush. But every time I mentioned college at home, Linda's laughter filled the room like poison. "College?" She'd scoff. "Who do you think is going to pay for that? You think scholarships just fall out of the sky? Wake up, girl. You belong in the real world, not in your little fantasies." I bit my tongue, but inside I thought, yes, scholarships do exist. And I'm going to earn one. Linda seemed to sense that I was slipping from her control. Her punishments grew harsher. She'd lock away my books if chores weren't finished, forbid me from staying after school for activities, even take money from the part-time job I managed to get at the library. Household contribution, she called it. My father noticed, of course, but he was weaker now, tired from years of keeping the peace. His hair had turned gray, his shoulders slumped with age. Sometimes he'd slip me a few dollars, whispering, "Don't tell Linda." His love was still there, but it was a fragile love, one that couldn't stand against Linda's will. One night, after another argument, I sat on my bed with my mother's locket in my hand. I whispered, "I don't belong here. I need to get out before I disappear completely." And so I began to plan. Quietly, secretly, I studied harder than ever, chasing every scholarship opportunity I could find. I stayed late at the library when I could, researching applications, writing essays under the flickering fluorescent lights. The more Linda tried to pull me down, the more determined I became to rise above her. But escape was not easy. The night she found one of my scholarship applications hidden under my mattress, I thought my world was over. She stormed into my room, waving the papers in my face. "You think you're leaving me?" she shouted, her eyes blazing. "After everything I've done for you? You're nothing without this house, without this family. Nothing." I didn't cry, not this time. I stood there, heart pounding, and for the first time in my life, I looked her in the eyes and said, "I'll prove you wrong." Her face turned red with rage. She tore the papers in half, right there in front of me. But what she didn't know was that I had already mailed out another copy. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving Linda's cruelty, I was fighting back. Years have passed since I left that house. I'm no longer the scared little girl who flinched at every word Linda spat at me. I'm a woman now, one who has built her own life, step by step, out of the pieces she tried to shatter. College opened doors I never thought possible. I graduated with honors, found a career I love, and created a home where laughter is genuine, not forced. For the first time, I choose who I let into my world. And I choose people who bring warmth. Not cruelty, but the past never disappears completely. Sometimes late at night, I still hear Linda's voice in my head. "You're nothing. You'll never be anything." Those words haunted me for years. They pushed me, they scarred me, and sometimes they nearly broke me. And yet, they also made me strong, because every time I heard them, I had a choice. Believe them or fight them. I chose to fight. My father passed away a few years after I left for college. I loved him deeply, but I also carried sadness for the battles he never won, for the times he let Linda silence him. I don't hate him for it. He gave me love where he could, and in his quiet way, he was the reason I kept going. As for Linda, I never saw her again after my father's funeral. She tried to speak to me, to pretend we were family, but I walked away. Not out of hate, but out of strength. She no longer had power over me, and I refused to give her another piece of my life. Today, when I look in the mirror, I don't see the unwanted child she tried to convince me I was. I see a survivor. I see someone who turned pain into fuel, who turned silence into a voice. My voice. And that's why I tell my story now, not for pity, not for revenge, but for every child who feels invisible, every soul crushed by someone else's bitterness. I want them to know, you are not defined by the cruelty you endure. You are defined by how you rise from it. I never got back the inheritance Linda stole. I never recovered the years she tried to break me. But I gained something far greater. I found myself. And that, in the end, is a treasure no one can ever take away. This is my story. The story of a girl who began her life with loss, who lived in shadows, but who learned, at last, to step into the light. The envelope came on a Thursday afternoon. tucked between bills and advertisements that Linda usually snatched first. But that day, I reached the mailbox before she did. My hands trembled as I tore it open right there on the porch, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. "Congratulations," it began. "We are pleased to offer you a full scholarship." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I had done it. Despite everything Linda tried to take from me, my inheritance, my peace, my hope, I had won something she couldn't steal, a chance. I pressed the letter to my chest, whispering, "Mom, I did it. I'm getting out." But Linda wasn't blind. That evening, she found the letter tucked under my pillow. Her face twisted as she read it, her voice dripping with venom. "A scholarship? Do you really think you're going to leave this house? Leave your father? Who's going to cook, clean, and do everything while I'm busy? You're not going anywhere." For a moment, fear gripped me. What if she managed to stop me? What if she convinced my father to forbid it? But then I remembered I didn't need her permission. For the first time, I had something bigger than her control. When I told my father, his eyes filled with tears. He hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "So proud. Go make a better life than the one I gave you." Linda overheard. Her face hardened like stone. She realized she was losing the battle she had fought all these years, and she wasn't about to surrender gracefully. Over the next few weeks, she did everything she could to sabotage me. She forgot to give me important documents I needed for enrollment. She hid bus schedules. She even called the college, pretending to be me, to try and cancel my admission. But I stayed one step ahead, thanks to the guidance counselor at school who helped me navigate the chaos. On the night before I was set to leave, Linda cornered me in the kitchen. The house was dark, my father already asleep. She stood close, her eyes glittering with fury. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "Go ahead, run off to your little college. But remember this, you'll always be nothing. No matter how far you go, you'll never escape who you are." For a long time, I would have believed her. But that night, something inside me had changed. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "I'm not nothing. I'm me, and that's enough." Then I walked away, leaving her standing in the shadows. It was the first night I felt truly free. The morning I left home felt surreal. I carried one worn-out suitcase, stuffed with secondhand clothes, a few books, and my mother's locket. That was all I owned. My father hugged me so tightly I thought he'd never let go. His eyes were red. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Be brave, sweetheart. Live the life your mother wanted for you." Behind him, Linda stood with her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin, angry line. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't wish me luck. She just watched me walk out the door, as if daring me to fail. But I didn't look back. Not this time. The bus ride to campus was long, but every mile felt like chains breaking. For the first time, I was traveling toward a future that belonged to me. I stared out the window at the blur of trees and towns, my heart racing with fear and excitement all at once. College was overwhelming at first. The dorm rooms, the crowds of students, the endless lectures. It was like stepping into another world. But it was also a world where no one knew me as that girl, without a mother, or the stepdaughter who didn't belong. Here, I was just me. Still, the scars Linda left behind followed me. When someone laughed too loudly, I flinched. When a teacher praised my work, I waited for the insult that never came. I struggled to believe I deserved kindness, that I was worthy of success. Years of Linda's voice echoed in my head, whispering that I was nothing. But slowly I started to build new voices around me. Friends who encouraged me, professors who believed in me, nights spent studying in the library where no one demanded. I scrubbed floors or washed dishes. Freedom was strange. It felt both exhilarating and terrifying. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, missing my father, wishing my mother could see me now. But there were also mornings when I woke up smiling, realizing I no longer had to answer to Linda's cruelty. One evening, I wore my mother's locket to a campus event. A girl I barely knew complimented it, saying it was beautiful. I smiled and said, "It was my mom's." For the first time in my life, the words didn't ache. They felt like strength. Like carrying her with me, not as a loss, but as a legacy. I began to understand something I never had before. Freedom wasn't just about leaving the house where I was trapped. It was about leaving behind the belief that I was powerless. And slowly I was learning to believe that my life, my story, was mine to write.